Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Brad Burns Bridges podcast.
I'm Brad.
And I'm Bridges. We're back here with another episode today. But real quick before we get into it, we want to say thank you for all the support that we got on our last video. Views were way up. Really appreciating that. We know that it's probably due to, Big Bridge getting after it. And, we appreciate it. I want to say if you are new, please like and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into it. So last week, Brad, championship games, really before the end of the regular season, now it's into bonus games, bowl games, college football
Yep.
playoff. So we had some picks from last week. It was a pretty mediocre week from everyone. I went 3 of 5, Brad 2 of 5, Big Bridge 2 of 5. So that brings me and Brad's total to 39 of 60 and 35 of 60. So we are going to figure out something for the bowl games to keep this rolling because this cannot end now in such a tight race. We are back with another guest on today's episode. He is a huge Hog fan, knows a lot more than both Brad and I about the Razorbacks, but he's runs an Instagram account called RAZORBACKOLOGY. So if you do not know of them, go ahead and go to Instagram, give that a follow. He's got great thoughts on everything Razorback. So without further ado, let's let our buddy Ben into the podcast. What is up, my friend?
Let's go.
How's it going?
Hey, cheers. Thanks for doing this. Uh, we thought it was a
Cheers.
great week to bring in, a little new province action.
I'm rocking the Philosopher King. I mean, I felt like I'm on a podcast with two kings. I gotta
Hey,
look the part.
appreciate that. Well, Brad, this has been Ben Brad. But yeah, man,
Pleasure.
it's been
Thank you for coming on.
yeah, for sure.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been a long time coming. I know Jake and I have talked about it for a while, and we've watched a bunch leading up to this one. And for a couple guys just kind of winging it, you guys do a pretty good job. So hope we can keep that high level of success with this one. I don't want to bring it down too much.
Heck yeah, well, we appreciate you taking the time to come on. We thought it'd be a great week because, being a huge college, sports fan, the biggest thing in college athletics happened over the weekend. The College Football Playoff Committee made their decision, right? And it has been up in the air about was this the right decision, leaving Florida State out, keeping Alabama or putting Alabama in front of them. With that being said, what do you think about this decision? Did they make the right call? Ben, I'll let
Yeah,
you.
I think I was even sitting at work today, and somebody walked over and he's like, "What do you think about the committee? Do you think they made the right decision?" And I thought about it. It's a big deal. Like everybody is talking about it. And to answer your question, I do think they made the right decision. I think the committee is there to pick the four best teams to put into the college football playoff. Today, if we played Florida State on a neutral field against everybody in the top 25, I'm not sure they beat more than 5 or 6 teams. It is. I don't think there was a right answer. I necessarily don't even think there was even a right choice. I think it's an incredibly difficult thing to have to tell those student athletes in Tallahassee that you guys did all you could. You had a perfect season, but you're not going to be able to play for a national championship in a Power Five conference. It is absolutely gutting. I saw a couple things from Jordan Travis. One, him saying that he wished he would have broken his leg sooner, so the country could have seen see the rest of the team play, and that's just, I mean, that's heartbreaking, and then it makes me wonder too, like, what if Florida State would have kept this under wraps a little bit and just said he's day to day? Then I think they absolutely would be in the playoffs. So I get it. I think for me, and then Brad, I'll let you go. I think for me, the anger that I feel is stemming from a lot of people isn't what the committee did. It's the function of how the committee or how the playoff is orchestrated right now. You can only take 4 teams.
Yeah.
So if you're one of those, it should be 8. It should be 12. To me, that's a separate conversation. If So I don't know. It's a tough deal, but I think at the end of the day, Alabama was going to beat that Florida State team by 100, and
Yep.
that's just kind of the way it is.
Yep. Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And to Ben's point, it is a huge deal. I think I just saw um, the Florida legislator just allocated $1 million to help Florida State in their legal battles with the committee or whatever, the NCAA. I'm not sure, but he's right. Everyone's taking notice. It's a huge deal. Everyone was watching Sunday morning when they announced, and honestly, I had no idea what they were going to do. I agreed with the decision with, one Michigan, two Washington, three Texas, four Alabama. But, with the history of kind of their decisions, the committee, I wasn't too entirely sure. Like in the past, we've seen Ohio State with a third string quarterback get in over a solid TCU and Baylor squad. The difference was though, we saw Cardell Jones kind of play really well in his one opportunity. Unlike the two quarterbacks we saw from Florida State, it wasn't pretty. I watched a lot of the Florida game. That was kind of a train wreck. And then, I kind of briefly saw the Louisville game, 16-6. I mean, not a lot going on there. But yeah, I totally get the frustration from their fan base. It's an unprecedented thing from a 13-0 team from a Power Five school. We've seen, undefeated teams from, group of five schools. One that comes to mind is UCF. I'm pretty sure they're undefeated 2 straight years, not getting in. And so, you look back in like history, and another team that comes to mind is Boise State from the early or mid 2000s. I mean, they had some really good squads, but never even considered for a national championship in the BCS era. So it's happened before at a lower level, but for a Power Five team to do this, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I agree, and I'm really excited for these matchups. I think it's going to be one of the best playoffs we've seen.
Yeah, I am going to agree with y'all. No shock. I'm a huge SEC fan. I think that the gauntlet, even the easy schedules in the SEC, Georgia, for example, like they still had to beat a top 10 squad in Missouri, and they have to beat a Tennessee team that's ranked in the top 25. They played Kentucky earlier in the year, who just beat Louisville, the game before they play Florida State. So a lot of these, I just think the strength of schedule and the road the SEC has to take is a huge factor in this. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the ACC this year because Clemson didn't look as good as they normally were. They weren't as dominant. You kind of had Florida State running away with it. The ACC was a little disappointing. Strength of schedule um, being that lower than Bama, I think plays a factor. But I do think it comes straight down to not having Jordan Travis, seeing the other product that was on the field. But I mean, it is so hard to look at a team that's undefeated, Power Five, in a big conference and say, hey, you didn't lose, but you don't get in.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks, especially with the elite defense that they had all year. That was kind of the backbone of that squad and willed them through those last two games without Jordan Travis. Their defense is up there with some of the best units in the country, but you just see your key player go down, and it's as brutal as it is. That's life, Stuff doesn't go your way all the time. But I do think that they got it right. I don't know how you leave an Alabama team out, that their only other loss is to a team that is currently in the playoff as well early in the season. And you go into Atlanta, which it's not a home game, but I mean, you're playing an SEC championship in Atlanta against a team that hasn't lost in damn near 3 years. You show up and you pretty much take it wire to wire against Georgia. I I think they got it right. But I do want to kind of talk about how this whole landscape is changing next year. So we're going from a 4 team to a 12 team playoff, and this seems to not be an issue. Do you think that's going to be the case with the 12 team playoff, or do you still think we're going to have conversations like this in the future?
I think there's going to be a lot less fuel to people's anger when we move to a 12 team. I think if you think next year, instead of the conversation being should Florida State be number 4, number 5, and on the cusp of the playoff with a chance to play for a national championship, it's going to be oh, should this three-loss Ole Miss team get in as the 12 seed, or should it be a two-loss Michigan State? And you're going to be like, well, neither of those teams really have a chance at winning the national championship. So, as this may not even be the last time we expand to be honest with you, we may find a way to go to 16. And then at some point, like Mike Leach hoped for a while back, he said he would just ask we to do a 64 team playoff, make it the college
March
basketball
Madness.
March Madness style. Just go with it that way. So I think I don't know. I think I was a little more of a proponent with the two team. I get it. More games, more money, more chances for our teams to make it, and we know that it was probably going to be a long time until Arkansas was going to be a top four team. So maybe one of these years they kind of light the world on fire and have sneak in a good year like Missouri did this year and like Ole Miss has the last couple of years. So I think we're still going to have those same conversations with the 12 team playoff. I just think there's going to be a lot less energy and anger or passion behind it, knowing that you're battling between a three loss team for the 11, 12, or 13 seed. You probably don't have a great shot at winning the national championship.
Yeah. Yeah. Brad?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things I've been hearing kind of from the Florida State supporters is the fact that they were undefeated, right? I mean, they literally did everything they possibly could to finish the season, right? There's no other games they could have won. Obviously, we're going to take out the Jordan Travis injury. I mean, no one could have done anything about that. But to Ben's point, next year we're going to be pulling hairs between. I think if you would have had a 12 teamer this year, it'd have been Ole Miss and OU. I think OU was the last team out, and so it's like I don't see as much passion towards that kind of debate where we have an undefeated Power Five school that got left out in pretty unique terms, and so I'm excited for it. More games. I think the biggest thing I'm excited for is the home playoff games. I think those atmospheres are going to be absolutely insane. Something we've never seen before. I mean, imagine a mid-December game in Fayetteville. Like, I mean, that's insane. So something to look forward to. But yeah, I don't think we'll ever have a debate this passionate amongst the sports community.
Yeah. I think that the conference, talking about this now, we need to talk about the expanded conferences that are going to be happening through college football next year in athletics with the SEC gaining Oklahoma and Texas. You got the Big Ten that's kind of bringing in some schools. We're basically building some super conferences here going forward. So you're going to have teams that are going to have one or two losses that are up there with the best teams in the country, top 10 caliber teams with the SEC and the Big Ten. Could you imagine having, like Texas would have played probably 5 teams within the top 15 at the time of the regular season this year? And you look at this 12-team playoff, Ben, you were talking about, having 3 losses. But with this, strength of schedule in the SEC and the Big Ten, especially next year, you're going to see some really good teams with 2 or 3 losses that probably deserve to be in, like the Alabama. We beat Georgia. We have 1 loss, but we deserve to be in that kind of statement going forward with a lot of SEC teams because it's going to be rare to see. You're going to see people like Georgia and Alabama have these great seasons, or maybe Ole Miss go on a run. But whenever you start playing big dogs every week, and the teams that you're playing are top 15 every week, you're going to have some teams drop with home field and stuff. So I do think that brings some craziness to this, new college football system with 12 teams because you're going to have some teams in the ACC with, 1 loss. But who are they really playing? So it's going to be interesting to see because you're going to see this debate just continue forever with we deserve this. And then you're going to have teams saying, oh, well, we didn't lose. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how the committee views it going forward with maybe in Alabama or Georgia with 1 loss when we're in this 12-team playoff where a undefeated Florida State team has injuries where would they have been ranked this year type thing, you know? Like it would be acceptable to put them at like 5 or 6 or maybe 7 with 0 losses because they lose their star player. So I think college football, although the playoff is going to be expanded and more teams are going to be accepted, I still think that there's going to be a lot of decisions that are made similar to the one that we just saw that are going to turn some heads. Do y'all have anything else on this topic before we get into the next topic on our debate?
I'll just say real quick, you bring up a good point with the conferences. I've kind of been talking about Power 5 or whatever. I mean, what's next year going to look like? Are we going to be saying Power 4? Is it Power 2 with Big Ten, SEC?
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see kind of what the committee, what the rationale is come selection time.
Yeah. You got anything?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd jump on that would be if I'm Florida State, I think about if I would have went 13-0 in the Big Ten, if I would have went 13-0 in the SEC, oh, it's an absolute no-brainer that they should be in. Whether your starting quarterback gets hurt or not, it doesn't matter. If you go 13-0, if you go 13-0 in any of those leagues, you're in. Now, granted, I don't think they would have been able to go 13-0 and then miss their starting QB the last 2 games and go undefeated. I don't think that would have happened. But if I'm Florida State, I'm thinking, man, this conference didn't really help us this year. Next year it'll be different, and they get conference bids and whatnot. But I think we're kind of just inching towards a Power 2 to Brad's point. And if I'm Florida State and Clemson, you don't want to get left behind. So I could see them two being a pair that jump at some point.
Absolutely. Well, real quick before we get into the Razorbacks, Brad is a big time Iowa fan as well. I think we need to give a shout out to them for making the Big Ten title game. I know it didn't go your way, man, but you lost.
Shout out.
Yeah, you lost your starting.
Pour one out for them.
You lost your starting quarterback, man, and y'all were able to battle.
Too many injuries. Yeah, too many injuries all year. They played hard, man. Take away that punt return and that goofy fumble call. I don't even know what to call it. I mean, I come back from commercial and they're at the 5-yard line. I'm like, well, we had the ball. Come on. So, no, it was a great year. It'll be the last time we're in the Big Ten championship for 30 years with the new kind of conference. So I enjoyed it, but we'll see. We'll see about next year.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into the Hogs. There was some breaking news at the end of last week that our offensive line coach was let go, and we are bringing in a guy named Eric Mateos from Baylor. Ben, what do you think about this hire? And then kind of get into what do you expect to see under him next year?
Yeah, I think he comes from a really good background. Him and Pittman have crossed paths before, and Mateos was a GA under one of Pittman's staff. So those two have a connection. Listened to Mateos talk on a Razorback Daily a couple days ago with Q and Z, and he's energetic. He seems like a guy you'd want to play for. Before he was at Baylor, he was at BYU, and he was on a watch list for the Joe Moore Award, which gives the best offensive line in college football. That's what that award goes to. So he's had really good offensive lines in the past. I do think that oftentimes we, and even you can go with Petrino on this one too, we judge hires in the offseason before they even happen. You can say, oh, this is an excellent hire. And then you start playing some games, maybe it's not a good hire. You could say, oh, who's this guy? This doesn't seem like a great hire. And then you get a few games into the season and it ends up being rock solid. So I'm always really just try to stay kind of in the middle on every coaching hire, whether it seems like it's great, good or bad. But this was one that needed to happen. I think Cody Kennedy, this first couple of years here, did a fine job. And this year, for whatever reason, just couldn't really get it to click. I know a lot of people looked up Eric Mateos' stats with Baylor last year, and they weren't world beaters either. But they had 2 years prior to that where they were good. So him and Cody Kennedy, honestly, for the last 3 years, they've almost mirrored each other. I think from a high level, when you look at Mateos and what his offensive line brings to the table, A lot of physicality. They like to go downhill in their running game. It seems to be more of what a Sam Pittman style offense would like. And then you say that, and then you say, well, Petrino's there, and that doesn't really seem like it matches up perfectly well. But if the guy can recruit and if he can motivate, that's really my standard and my bar. So having Pittman in his corner will be good. But I think it was good. I think it was time for a refresh at the offensive line position. So happy to have him, and he seems like he's going to be a solid fit.
Yeah. Well, Brad, this is a big one because I think last week you and Bridge both, or Big Bridge, both were talking about the offensive line being the biggest disappointment that y'all saw throughout this season, and the biggest thorn in the Razorback side. So they go out, they make a change. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I like it. Like Ben said, he had a really good year in 2021. Baylor won the Big 12. Since then, they've kind of slid back a little. But Baylor's a hard place to recruit. I mean, they're not historically this football powerhouse, decent academic standards. And so it's a tough place to, put really high level teams on the field. And so I think he's going to have really good success, with recruiting and building his front at Arkansas. I think that'll be a really good mix. And like you said, he's worked under Sam Pittman before. There's a good, or you'd think, good camaraderie there if Sam Pittman is willing to hire him again. But yeah, really excited for it. And like we said last week, it's going to be a real critical area of the team next year. And so, you know, good to get the hire in now rather than later. Get ahead of the portal, which we'll probably talk about later when we mention the portal. But it's the Wild West, and so good to get this hire settled before anything else.
Yeah. Well, I'm a fan of the hire, man. Ben, I think we've talked about this before, but I'm a sucker for people coming out and being like, man, I couldn't wait to get back to Fayetteville. Like, this was a destination that I want to be. And I feel like Pittman has done that with all of his hires, other than maybe Travis Williams or someone like that. But you see Dan Enos, like, he's been here before. Obviously, that crashed and burned. But you see Bobby Petrino, like, he wanted to come back and right his wrong. And you see this offensive line coach in Eric Mateos from Baylor. And I think on the Q&Z podcast that you're talking about, the Razorback Daily, he was talking about how he always wanted to get back here. And that's something that really sits with me because deep down, I love the Hogs, and I want someone who wants to be here, and it's not just a step in their journey. So I really value those in hires going in, as soon as they come in. What does their presser look like? What are their thoughts of Fayetteville and the program? Do they actually want to be here? Because I think that if you actually want to be somewhere, your work is going to resemble that and reflect that. So it's going to be interesting seeing, because it really won't get any worse than it was. 50 plus sacks. Watching every single game, it felt like KJ was, taking one step in his drop back, and there was already people in the backfield. So hopefully it turns out to be a great hire and we bounce back. But yeah, I think I'm just hoping for the best. I'm not gonna set my expectation bar too high. I want to just see improvement. So I do like the hire. Moving on, there's been some big news in the Razorback community recently. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen a lot of people enter the portal. One thing we know about the portal, you're going to lose a lot of guys, but you can gain a lot of guys. You win and lose in the transfer portal in today's college football. Ben, what is the biggest portal departure in your mind so far that we've had, and what do we need to do to improve through the portal?
Yeah, well, the porteth giveth and the portal taketh. Where feels like you can refresh Twitter about every 30 minutes and either somebody is leaving the roster or somebody's rumored to be leaving the roster. Arkansas offered a guy. I mean, it's chaos. But the biggest departure we've had, I think Rocket is up there. I think that's a big one.
I think
I
people who
think,
try to say that he's not the biggest are just going off last year. I mean, 2 years ago when we were bowl game, and the year before that, as when he was a true freshman, absolute stud.
yeah,
He was a rock back there.
yeah, I think I could hear an argument for Pupal. Um, that was a substantial loss as well, and I think by the time I get done talking about it, I think I could be convinced that Pupal would be a bigger departure than Rocket, just because running backs, for whatever reason, in today's game are not as valuable as they maybe used to be. Um, and the way our linebacker depth looks, we don't have a lot of guys back there. And I know we've lost a couple others. Um, and we have a lot more depth at the running back position, but Poopall was a stud. And for what Rocket didn't run very well this year, and whether that be injury or the offensive line that he had, it didn't look like he was full go. It never really looked like he was playing like the Rocket that we used to know. There was a screen pass against Texas A&M that he took for about 35, 40 yards. And I remember when he broke that thing loose, and I'm like, wow, this is like retro Rocket, like
Yeah.
vintage Rocket. Here we go. Like he's back. And he just never seemed to get to that 2021, 2022 version of himself. And there was people talking about him coming into this season where he was the best running back in the SEC. It was him and Quinshawn Judkins out of Ole Miss. And he never really was able to put the puzzle pieces together. So I think it's between him and Chris Paul. I think you could, for me, they're 1A, 1B. I think you could really talk me into either one.
Yeah. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Those two guys definitely stand out when you're scrolling through Twitter and see the Razorbacks kind of dropping from the squad. But yeah, it's crazy. It almost blows your mind like how these college coaches like keep up with this whole new aspect of college football. I mean, it's not like they're hiring more coaches. I mean, this is just such a huge, responsibility. I mean, right when we just finished championship weekend, going into bowl games, it's madness. And like Ben said, it's giveth and taketh. Like so many guys are leaving, but a lot also from other schools. So many guys are leaving, and gives us opportunity to kind of build back the roster. Kind of on your other part of the question, like who we were looking for, I saw a lot of offers for defense, and it kind of makes sense since we're retaining our defensive coordinator, so he's kind of been able to get ahead of it. A lot of decent guys have gotten offered, so we'll see, and who's kind of coming our way. But real excited to see kind of what Petrino and our new guy Eric Mateos kind of do on the offensive side. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, if you just look at the quarterbacks, like the Ohio State guy McCord, really like the Duke quarterback. I mean, just tons of guys. So
A lot of
we
big
got
names from a
options.
lot of good programs that are going.
We have options, but it'll just be kind of on the coach's side to just execute. And another kind of thing I was thinking about, like the fact that we're not in a bowl game, it kind of used to be looked at as, well, shoot, like you miss out on all those practices kind of to develop your squad for the next season. I mean, it's about a month worth while our guys are sitting at home. Well, now with the transfer portal, like our coaches are be able to 100% focus on building back this roster. And so, I mean, I guess you lose a little of the development of the guys who do stay, but I think where we're at as a team, I think our focus needs to be on the transfer portal and getting some better talent into Fayetteville.
Yeah. I think Pooh and Rocket by far top two. I do lean linebacker just because you have a Gustave or Isaiah, the freshman that came in. He looked good. DeBinion still hasn't announced. You got two solid backs that have played and looked good in SEC games. So I do lean more on the defensive side of the ball. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm expecting some big time splashes. Just hoping to bring in as much talent as we can on the offensive line and on the defense. So yeah, going forward, that's going to be big. I want to kind of skip over this little recruiting trail. We're down into the 10-minute mark, but I think we should show the Arkansas basketball program some love. They had a very tough battle for Atlantis. They didn't have any rhythm offensively. The defense was my biggest concern. It looked like they were just giving away free buckets. But we have a huge game in the ACC Challenge against Duke last week. Ben, I believe you were there, correct? You want
Yeah.
to talk about that environment real quick?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was wild. It was vintage Bud Walton Arena. I sat up in the upper level. Um, and you really can't get the feel for how loud it is up there because everybody's yelling down. So the closer you get down to the court, the louder it gets. But from up top, you could still tell it was a ruckus environment. And I think a lot of people in the arena sense to how hungry this team is, and even as an athletic department, we're coming off a really tough football season. The fans are looking for something to cheer about, and man, they packed the place. I mean, they were loud from start to finish, and Duke never held control of that game
Yeah.
up until those couple minutes at the very end. Arkansas had control or maintained control the entirety of the way. Um, I think with a young team, with a team with so many new pieces, I think people sometimes overlook how difficult it can actually be to get a roster to come together. Brad, when I think about your Iowa Hawkeye basketball teams, and my dad's a Wisconsin alum, so I know some of his Wisconsin teams, and especially in the old days with Bo Ryan, like those teams were together for years and years and years, and those guys didn't go in the portal. Those guys didn't leave. You had fifth year seniors and juniors, and like, those guys stayed together all the time. So yeah, you could start off your season in November and look pretty good. With Musselman's teams, they don't look great at the start of the year, and I would hope by now we would kind of give them a free pass. But yeah, they didn't look great in the Bahamas. They didn't look great against UNC Greensboro at home when they dropped that one. But the fact of the matter is, when they put everything together, and they play with unbelievable effort, energy, and enthusiasm, they can beat some of the best teams in the country. We saw it in the exhibition game against Purdue, and we saw it against Duke in the ACC Challenge. So it may not be pretty all the time, but with Muss's teams, we know that they do continue to get better as the season progresses, and they will go through some highs and some lows. They'll lose to Vanderbilt at home, they'll lose to Hofstra at home, they'll lose to UNC Greensboro at home. But if it means beating blue bloods on neutral floors at the end of the year, I think we'd all rather have that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible to think about the last 3 years and some of the teams we've beaten, some of those brand names we've beaten. You talk about Kansas, you talk about Gonzaga, you talk about Duke, you talk about Kentucky.
Yep.
And you beating one of those guys, you're like, okay, you may have just gotten lucky. No, we've beaten 4 of those teams. It is incredible to think about, and it's a testament to what Muss has been able to do here. Massive game on Saturday. Oklahoma is a fantastic team this year. Porter Moser's put it all together. So that's going to be a really difficult test, especially if you're without Brazil, who sprained his ankle in the last game against Furman.
Yeah.
But really, we're still really bullish about the team.
Yeah. Are you going to that game on Saturday?
I'm not. I'll be out of town for a wedding, but I'll be rooting them on from afar.
Gotcha. I'll be there in attendance. I super pumped about it. Real quick, Brad, I want to take this real quick. Man, I thought it was an awesome game to watch, but I think you hit the nail on the head. We're in a different world. Like college athletics are changing. Transfer portal is the biggest issue. And with Muss, he brings in all these pieces and he has a vision beforehand of what these guys can do. It's about finding the right lineup. Everyone can't play together. He is able to pick and choose, find the right lineups, get them in positions to succeed. And it seems to all come down and click first round, or, getting into the SEC play. You see it start clicking and then we kind of lose it. And then it all comes back together when the season's on the line. I thought this was an awesome showing because I went to the Purdue scrimmage, and I know it was a scrimmage. That game was competitive. And whenever you go in there and you beat it, they probably left that arena. They are the best team in the country in their eyes. And then you go through and you struggle in some games at home and you lose to a UNC Greensboro and you go to Atlantis and you really struggle. I think they lose their swagger. And I think they just got it back because you see, they didn't play good against Furman on Monday and they scored 90 plus points. We got to clean up the defense, but I'm really high on this Hogs team going forward. Big game on Saturday. Brad, we got 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. What do you think?
Cool. Yeah, no, I'll be quick. Yeah, I agree. Super high on the Hogs. It boils down to just faith in Muss. He's kind of one of the best coaches in college basketball. Best basketball coach I've ever had as a fan of a team. Be quick. Game against Duke reminded me of the game our senior year against Auburn. You know, we came into that game not as hot as we may would have liked to. With a huge matchup like that, Auburn was number one in the country coming to our stadium, and we were just looking for a boost. And that stadium was rocking, just probably how Ben described the Duke game. And we came out of it with a W, and we were hot after that. So hopefully we can keep the steam rolling for the rest of the year. The Duke game's a lot earlier in the season, unlike that Auburn game. So hopefully this leads into SEC play, and maybe we can take a SEC title this year, which would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Ben, got a quick question for you. Does this team because in the past we've seen struggles and they have been long-term struggles early in the year where you don't see much good. Like you're cranking out wins, but you see them play Duke that way and defense is elite, given they miss some shots that I think that they normally make. But seeing a team click this early in the season and kind of figure it out, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I still think it can be a little bit of an optical illusion at times. I mean, we went from losing to Greensboro, beating a not really a good Stanford team, losing a tough game, a good team against Memphis, and then losing another good team in North Carolina, and then beating Duke. So the roller coaster is more than in effect this year already. I think the team, for them to show flashes of what they could potentially be in March is enough that I need to see, and it is enough of I don't know. It's not a false hope because we've seen Muss and what he's done in March in the last 3 years. So it is a little bit challenging sometimes in November, December, even sneaking into January. But I think the overarching theme here is that Arkansas can play with anybody, and not a lot of teams can say that right now.
Absolutely. Hey, well, that wraps us up for episode 13 of the Brad Burns Bridges podcast. Ben, again, thank you so much for coming on here and taking some time to talk some college athletics and the Razorbacks. Want to give you a shout out your page, Razorbackology. If no one follows, go on Instagram, give it a follow. He puts out some great content. Brad, thanks for doing it. Any last little statements?
Oh, thank you, Ben. It was a pleasure. It was fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. That was a pleasure.
Cheers. Thanks for coming on. Like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.